You are alone in a room, on the phone. Nobody can see you. And your hands are moving. They shape things in the air. They chop. They spread. They draw an outline of something that isn't there. You are explaining where the building is, or how the thing broke, or why you disagreed. And your hands are doing half the work for an audience that does not exist. You have probably caught yourself doing it and felt slightly ridiculous. You may have even stopped deliberately and put your hand down, and then 30 seconds later, it was up again. You probably assume this is a leftover, a habit that spills over from face-to-face conversation, running by accident when nobody is watching. But the real answer is far stranger, because those gestures were never for the person listening, and the proof of that comes from people who have never seen a gesture in their lives. In 1998, two researchers named Jana Iverson and Susan Goldin-Meadow published a short paper in the journal Nature that asked a question so simple it is almost startling nobody had settled it before. If gesturing is something we pick up by watching other people talk, then what happens to someone who has never watched anyone talk? They studied people who were blind from birth. No visual model. Not one gesture ever observed. Not from a parent. Not from a friend. Not from a stranger on the street. They gestured anyway. Not occasionally. Not clumsily. They gestured at rates and in patterns comparable to sighted speakers, moving their hands through the air to shape ideas they were describing out loud. And then the researchers pushed it one step further, into the finding that makes the whole thing undeniable. They had blind speakers talk to blind listeners. Two people, neither of whom could see. And the hands still moved. Think about what that rules out. It cannot be imitation, because there was nothing to imitate. It cannot be for the listener, because the listener could not see. Whatever the hands were doing, they were doing it for reasons that had nothing to do with the person on the other end. So if gesture is not learned by watching, where does it come from? There is a second finding that narrows it down beautifully, and it comes from work led by Şeyda Özçalışkan. Different languages carve up the world differently. When English speakers describe something rolling down a hill, they tend to bundle the manner and the direction into a single gesture, because English bundles them into a single phrase. Turkish splits that description into two separate verbs, and Turkish speakers split it into two separate gestures. So the researchers looked at blind speakers of both languages. Blind Turkish speakers gestured like sighted Turkish speakers. Blind English speakers gestured like sighted English speakers. And the two language groups gestured differently from each other, regardless of whether anyone could see. Read that again, because it is the whole answer in one sentence. Their hands were following the shape of their grammar, not the shape of other people's hands, the shape of their own language, which means gesture is not a social decoration layered on top of speech. It is coming from inside the language system itself. Wherever your sentences are being built, your hands are being built alongside them, from the same blueprint. Now, before this gets too clean, there is a complication worth knowing, because it makes the picture more honest and more interesting. A team at the Max Planck Institute for Psycholinguistics published work in 2025 looking at exactly what blind people gesture about, and they found a split. For objects you hold in your hands, a pen, a spoon, blind and sighted people gestured almost identically. Both groups mimed the using of the thing. But for objects nobody handles, a bridge, a lion, blind participants gestured less. When the researchers asked both groups to simply list what they knew about those words in writing, the knowledge was strikingly similar. The blind participants knew what a bridge was. They knew what a lion was. What differed was whether that knowledge came out through the hands. So vision does shape gesture, at the edges. It is not that seeing is irrelevant, it is that seeing is not where gesture comes from. Which brings us back to the room, and the phone, and the hands moving for nobody. Here is the twist. You have always assumed the gesture is output, something your brain finished thinking and then sent outward, like the words, a message leaving. It is not. The gesture is part of the thinking itself. Goldin-Meadow spent decades on this, and the evidence is consistent in a way that is hard to argue with. Watch a child work through a problem they cannot yet explain, and you will often see their hands express the correct idea before their mouth can. The knowledge shows up in the body first, still forming, not yet ready to be a sentence. And in experiments where people are asked to explain something difficult while holding their hands still, the explaining gets harder. Give the hands back, and the mental load drops. The gesture is not spending effort. It is saving it. That is why you cannot stop. When you put your hand down deliberately on that phone call, you were not suppressing a social habit. You were taking a tool away from yourself in the middle of using it. The hands are not describing the thought to them. They are helping you have it. And this is where it opens onto something much bigger, though honestly here the ground is less certain, and it is worth saying so plainly. Some researchers, notably Michael Corballis, have argued that language began in the hands. That gesture came first and speech arrived later. Others push back hard, arguing the two evolved together with neither leading. It is a genuine open debate, not a settled story, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something. But whichever way that argument resolves, one thing is not in dispute. Whatever your hands are doing while you speak, it is not an accessory. It is woven into the machinery. It survived without a visual model. It follows the grammar of your language. It carries meaning your mouth has not caught up to yet. So the next time you are alone in the car or pacing an empty room with the phone against your ear, and you catch your hand drawing a shape in the air for absolutely nobody, do not put it down. You are not being silly. You are watching something older than the conversation you are having, still doing its job. Your hands were never talking to them. They were talking to you.